14 fantasy points, 13 fantasy points, 12 fantasy points, 12 fantasy points, and 11 fantasy points. That's what our top 5 kickers gave us in fantasy football in week 9, and that's exactly the answer sometimes. If you're dealing with a bad wide receiver injury, or you've just got a player on bye week, sometimes the best answer is to upgrade your freaking kickers. So that's why we go through top 12 kicker rankings every week, and I'm the only fantasy YouTuber that does it. So make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. So get into our first tier right here. We've got Austin Seibert and Chris Boswell. Now, obviously, these two teams are playing each other, and I've obviously gotten a couple questions during the week. Austin Seibert is injured, and most people who have him are panicking right now. What do I do if Austin Seibert does not go? Well, I'll tell you this right now. I'll be completely honest with you guys. What I have read does not indicate that he's going to play. He's got a hip injury, and typically, these lower body injuries with kickers are not particularly good. He already missed Wednesday's practice. The only reason he's listed on here is because if he goes, I want a piece of him. Now, if he doesn't go, and the other option, whoever they end up getting, he definitely would be inside the top 12, but probably not at number 1. But if Seibert goes, he absolutely is playable. He's been excellent all year, averaging more than 13 fantasy points per game. He's been tremendous this year. And then with Chris Boswell, he's been awesome too. The only reason he's not a top 2 kicker, not the number 2 kicker, is because of the fact that they were just on bye. Kaimi Fairbairn was able to overtake him this past week because Boswell was on bye. Boswell's been great too, averaging more than 12 fantasy points per game. He's always accurate. That dude rarely misses a kick. And at Washington, listen, they're coming off a bye week themselves, and Washington's defense is beatable. They're not bad, but they're definitely beatable. So Boswell, in this Pittsburgh Steelers offense, they're just going to continue to get him down there, find ways to get him opportunities to get 40, 50-yard field goals. That's just a given every week from Boswell. And then Justin Tucker at number 3 versus the Cincinnati Bengals. 2 nights, I love the matchup so much. Last time Justin Tucker played the Bengals here, Justin Tucker was excellent in fantasy football. And realistically, off to a slow start there in the beginning of the year, but he's been awesome. Basically since that Bengals game, when he had 13 fantasy points. He's had 1 game with less than 10 fantasy points since that Bengals game in week 5. He's been excellent in fantasy. So against the Bengals here, again, they can't stop them defensively. So there's no issue with the Bengals defense here being able to stop this offense. I've got Justin Tucker as another great kicker this week in fantasy football. And dropping down to our next tier right here, Kaimi Fairbairn at number 4 versus the Detroit Lions. I love Kaimi Fairbairn. He's been an excellent fantasy kicker. The reality with Kaimi Fairbairn is that I do believe this offense is just one of the best for a kicker as well. I love the fact that they're good enough to get you down there consistently, but sometimes it's not good enough to punch it in. Now, we'll have to see whether Nico Collins ends up playing in this game or not. That would impact the amount of times that they would be able to score a touchdown, in my opinion. But versus the Detroit Lions here, it's not a great matchup. Detroit's defense has been fantastic. That's what keeps Kaimi Fairbairn out of tier 1 this week, while also acknowledging, of course, he's a great play in fantasy this week. Younghoe Koo at number 5 at the New Orleans Saints on Sunday. Listen, Younghoe Koo has definitely been a little hit or miss lately. Like last week and in week 7, he hasn't done great in fantasy, but for the most part, over the last 2 months, he's been really good. Now, with Younghoe Koo, the only real concern I have is that maybe they're too efficient offensively this week against the Saints. The Saints defense are obviously getting worse, and the Falcons offense is just rolling right now. So there's a good chance that they end up putting like 28 points on the New Orleans Saints, and he just ends up kicking 4 extra point attempts for 4 points. There's also a good chance he kicks some field goals in there as well. So I do think that Younghoe Koo ends up being a good play this week against the Saints. And I've got Evan McPherson at number 6 in this matchup tonight versus the Baltimore Ravens. Again, the matchup is fantastic for fantasy football purposes from all angles. I want options everywhere. I want in on every single option in this matchup for fantasy football, except the defenses, of course, because there's going to be tons of scoring. And Evan McPherson, again, hit or miss. That dude is definitely hit or miss. Last week versus the Raiders, it was a hit because they were scoring tons of points. They couldn't be stopped offensively. Well, the Ravens game, he only had 4 points in that game. He also missed an important field goal attempt, and that was the only field goal attempt they had all day. Now, the reason why I think Evan McPherson has a better game than that first time versus Baltimore is because no T. Higgins this week for the Bengals. So they're without a top offensive playmaker, and that probably makes it more likely that they will end up kicking more field goals in this game. So I do think Evan McPherson ultimately has a much better outing in fantasy football this time than the first time that they played the Baltimore Ravens. Dropping down to our next tier right here. Jason Sanders at number 7 at the Los Angeles Rams. It's been a long time since I put Jason Sanders on my top 12. It does not happen very much. So this is a very special moment for him. I'm sure he's very happy to see this. Jason Sanders, the reality is that this guy, most of the time, the top concerns I have with him are that their offense is so efficient in getting in the end zone that most of the time he just kicks extra points. Now this year, obviously without Tua, it hasn't been good for the most part. But with 2 games, with Tua back so far, 11 fantasy points and 9 fantasy points. Those were against Arizona and Buffalo too. 2 pretty good defenses in fantasy. So, the Los Angeles Rams on Monday night, I do think there's more opportunities here for him to get some good opportunities here. Because with Sanders, they're not going to consistently score against the Rams defense, who is really, really good at this point. So I think he's got a lot of opportunities to kick more field goals. I actually end up really liking him. Jake Moody at number 8. Welcome back to Jake Moody. He's been on the IR for the San Francisco 49ers, missed several games, and he's coming back this week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, he is starting out the week questionable, but he ended up returning to practice. All signs are pointing by their roster moves and what they've done with him that he's going to end up playing this week. Jake Moody immediately becomes a top 12 kicker once again. Jake Moody, before he went down, that dude was averaging 11.6 fantasy points per game. He had only missed 1 field goal up to that point. Moody had been playing lights out. Obviously, it just sucks whenever he goes down. And it's like, okay, what is the chances that he's 100% healthy? Because it is an injury that, if re-injured, this could definitely affect how he kicks in this game in his first game back. But obviously, the matchup against the Bucs off the bye is definitely an opportunistic one. Tampa Bay, you can absolutely move the ball at will on these guys. And with the 49ers offense, they're starting to come together. So I do think that Jake Moody, very good opportunity in this matchup. And Harrison Butker at number 9 versus the Denver Broncos. Harrison Butker has been mostly good without Rashee Rice. Now, they did find their replacement to Rashee Rice last week with DeAndre Hopkins. And he had 7 fantasy points, which is not bad, but it's obviously not as good as he did the week prior versus the Raiders. So obviously, he's just in this situation where it's like, some weeks they'll be more efficient getting in the end zone, other weeks they won't be as efficient getting in the end zone. Now, this week against Denver, I do think this matchup is good for Harrison Butker in particular, because Harrison Butker is taking on a really stout defense here. And these divisional games, a lot of times, Kansas City doesn't end up pouring on the points. They just don't end up doing that. These teams understand this offense because they see him twice a year with Mahomes and Andy Reid. They know what they're trying to do here. So I do think Denver ends up playing them tough. Harrison Butker has field goal attempts in this game and maybe a couple extra points, but I do think that Harrison Butker will be a solid play at the kicker position this week. One thing I'm also definitely sure about is Lamar Jackson's projection on underdog this week. It's at 0.5 total yards, allowing new customers to basically win free money. So to take advantage of this, if you haven't taken advantage of underdog yet, go down in the comments, grab the link that's there, and use code FFN to sign up for underdog. When you take advantage and hit the higher on this sweat-free projection for Lamar Jackson tonight, they will match your first deposit 50% up to $1,000 in bonus cash. And dropping down to our last tier right here, Cam Dicker, I think is going to be a good play. Versus the Tennessee Titans this week, Cam Dicker has had really just a couple good games this year. Mostly been disappointing in fantasy football, though. He's not been bad. He's averaging 9.6 fantasy points per game, but he has missed more than several kicks. He's missed quite a few kicks this year, and he does have those games like last week where he missed 2 kicks and ends up only getting 3 points in a matchup where he should have had a really good fantasy week against the Cleveland Browns. So that's the concern here, is that Cam Dicker misses kicks and he doesn't always capitalize on his opportunities. But again, the Titans matchup is a good one. So I will ultimately take the shot on the opportunities that are presenting themselves for Cam Dicker this week, because the opportunities are definitely rich in this matchup right here. Brandon Aubrey at number 11. What it has come to. It's actually depressing. Obviously, he's still inside my top 12, but think of how far we've come. Those of you who have been watching this kicker rankings for the better part of 2 years now, Brandon Aubrey has been a top 5, top 3 kicker for the majority of the last 2 years. We're starting to see the issues with that because the Dallas Cowboys offense sucks. And Brandon Aubrey is still really good. He's only missed 2 kicks this year, and he's got one heck of a leg. But at the same time, Brandon Aubrey out of the bye week, 6 points, 9 points, which is not bad, but it's not great for Brandon Aubrey, who's averaging 12.1 fantasy points per game still, because at the beginning of the year, he had 21 points and 17 points. Well, this offense sucks. This team is a disgrace, and they're not going to have an easy time moving the ball versus the Philadelphia Eagles. It is not good. They've got no Dak Prescott. I don't see them moving the ball particularly well, especially if CeeDee Lamb does not play. So he's down here at number 11, and it hurts me to do it, but I've got to do it at this point. Now, dropping down to our last guy, John Parker Romo. Who's this guy? Who are you? First of all, who the hell are you? John Parker Romo is the new Minnesota Vikings kicker. If you did not see, last week Will Reichard was a disaster. He lost me some matchups actually last week. It really irritated me. And if you watch the game like he definitely was dealing with an injury, well, he definitely was. Because they put him on the IR. So they obviously had to pick up another kicker. And I do think this matchup against Jacksonville is really good. Obviously, Jacksonville can't stop a nosebleed. Their defense is a total disgrace. So the opportunities are absolutely there for John Parker Romo. I have no idea who this guy is. I don't know if he's good. I don't know if he's not. I don't know what the range he has is. I've got no idea. So all I can do is kind of guess a little bit and say based on offensive efficiency and based on matchup opportunity, I think he'll be a top 12 kicker this week. So let me know how your team is shaping out this week. And if you want to see the top 12 defense rankings this week, click on this video right here.